Bruchim Haba and welcome everyone. We're now in sunny California, in Los Angeles in the Valley, for a Shabbos of Chizuk on behalf of the yeshiva here in the Valley. And we'd like to share this week's presentation of Pesacheinu Megadim Parshas Pekudei. Parshas Pekudei ends that the Shechina, the Anon of Hashem, the cloud of Hashem, filled the Mishkan. The pasuk says, Perek Mem pasuk Lamedaled, Vayichas ha'anon es oyel moyed uchvoid Hashem molei es hamishkan. And then the last pasuk, Ki anan Hashem ala mishkan yoimam ve'eish ti alayla boy le'enei kol beis Yisrael b'chamasehim. So the parsha ends that the Shechina, the Anon, filled the Mishkan. And we want to connect it to the beginning of the parsha. And indeed, the Ramban points out that the reason why Sefer Shemais ends, that the Shechina filled the Mishkan, is not until the Shechina returned to the Mishkan where Klal Yisrael considered redeemed. But we have to ask ourselves, why were we zoicha that the Shechina should return to the Mishkan, should enter the Mishkan, should fill the Mishkan? And we like to suggest, very simply, based on the opening pasuk in the parsha. The parsha begins, Eila Pekudei HaMishkan Mishkan Ho'edus Asher Pukad Al Pi Moshe Avodas Halaviyim Biyad Isamar Ben Aharon HaKoyen. The Sforno famously writes that the pasuk here is enumerating the four main reasons why the Mishkan was eternal. It had eternal kedusha and never fell into the hands of the enemy. Number one, it was Mishkan Ho'edus. It housed the Luchos. The Luchos literally were a piece of the Kisei HaKavod. If something has some of the Kisei HaKavod in it, certainly it will be eternal. Number two, it was Al Pi Moshe. If Moshe Rabbeinu was the one, the supervisor, the orchestrator, then that lent an eternal quality, a special quality to it. Number three, Biyad Isamar. The avodah of Levim was under the auspices of Isamar. And number four, Betzalel ben Uri ben Chor L'mat Yehuda. So the Sforno writes the following words. The Sforno says that since the work was from the Miyuchasim and the Tzadikim, V'chein Sharsa Shechina b'masei yadeim, the Shechina dwelled in their handiwork because of these four ingredients, and there were tzaddikim involved in its construction. So the reason why we were zoicha to what it says in the last pasuk, namely that the Shechina filled the Mishkan, there was Hashras Shechina in the Mishkan, is because what it says in the first pasuk, and that is the four special ingredients of the Mishkan. Number one, it was Mishkan Ho'edus, it had the Luchos. Number two was Al Pi Moshe. Number three was through Isamar and Betzalel ben Uri ben Chor. Now, even on a more basic level, the opening pasuk says it's Mishkan Ho'edus. It's Eidus to Klal Yisrael that Hashem forgave us for the Chet HaEgel. What demonstrated that Hashem forgave us for the Chet HaEgel? What was the Eidus that Hashem forgave us for the Chet HaEgel? The Eidus was, says Rashi, the reason why it's Mishkan Ho'edus is because the Shechina dwelt on the Mishkan. The fact that the Shechina dwelt on the Mishkan indicates that HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgave us for the Chet HaEgel. And therefore, the last pasuk in the parsha, therefore the parsha ends that indeed, Ki anan Hashem ala Mishkan yoimam, that Hashem resided on the Mishkan. In other words, the opening pasuk says Mishkan Ho'edus. The Eidus is that Hashem forgave us for the Egel. How? Because he was Shoira Hishchina. And that's exactly what we read in the end of the parsha. And then finally, one more connection. Eila Pekudei HaMishkan. Our Chaim HaKadosh says, in general, you could say and have the following question. Usually there's a rule, Ein bracha metzuya loy bedavar hamanoi v'loy bedavar hasafar. Usually something that's counted or enumerated does not have bracha. And yet, this week's Parshas Pekudei, the counting, that literally the Rebbeinu Shem resided in this building where everything was counted. Says our Chaim HaKadosh, doesn't that fly in the face of Ein habracha mitzuya loy bedavar hamanoi? Now, let's think very carefully. That means our Chaim HaKadosh is saying, if blessing should not be found in something that's counted, then he's troubled. Then why was the Shechina on the Mishkan? Blessing and Shechina go hand in hand, meaning there's a question. Why was the Shechina on the Mishkan if blessing and Shechina don't come onto something that's counted? And the answer is Eila Pekudei HaMishkan. Eila Pekudei means for these there's counting and there's no problem and there's nothing detrimental in this minyan. Why? Because Mishkan, it's a matter of Kedusha. When it came to the Mishkan, just the opposite. The more it was enumerated, the more it was counted, the more bracha that was. So Eila, usually the Shechina wouldn't reside on something that's counted. But here, Eila, for these, Pekudei HaMishkan, for these, you're allowed to have a counting, because it's for the Mishkan. For these, in other words, the Shechina does dwell. Meaning the first pasuk in Pekudei is explaining, even though ordinarily the Shechina should not dwell on something that's counted, Eila Pekudei. For this type of counting, the Shechina will be there. And indeed, that's connected to the final pasuk that speaks about Hashem dwelling in this edifice. So both psukim are focused on the Hashras HaShechina in the Mishkan. So this concludes B'siyata D'Shmaya, Sefer Shemois, the Seder of Pesacheinu Megadim, showing the treats and the delicacies that await at the entrance and the exit, showing honor to Torah HaKadosha, wishing everyone Chazak, Chazak, V'Nischazek.